used to be a nation of farmers, but now it's less than 2% of the population in the United States. And so a lot of us don't know what it takes to grow food.
Over 12,000 years ago, people began planting and saving seed. Agriculture flowered, and civilizations were born. In China, thousands of varieties of rice were grown. Over 5,000 kinds of potatoes were cultivated worldwide. In the US alone, more than 7,000 varieties of apples were grown in the 19th century. In the 20th century, the face of farming underwent a radical change. The manufacture of nitrogen-based bombs during World War I led to the development of nitrogen-based chemical fertilizers. Nerve gas, developed during World War II, was slightly modified to make insecticides. DDT was the hero of its generation. New technologies promised higher yields, increased food production, cheaper prices, and greater availability. By the mid-20th century, these technologies, along with new developments in plant breeding, led to the Green Revolution.
I think the people who first imagined the Green Revolution had good hearts. Lots of people are starving around the planet. That's long been the case in human civilization. Their thinking was if we could just systematize agriculture like we did industry in the 1800s and bring it worldwide, bring one system that works, we can solve the problems that people have long had with agriculture.
The next several decades saw a remarkable increase in production. Year after year, huge fields were planted with only one variety of crop. These monocultures created an ecological vacuum that insects and disease could exploit. This uniformity has led to some of the greatest agricultural catastrophes of mankind. In the mid-1800s, very few varieties of potatoes were cultivated in Ireland. When they became diseased, 1 million people died. When the same potato blight attacked Peru, they suffered fewer consequences. Today, only 4 varieties of potatoes are widely grown. 97% of the varieties of vegetables grown at the beginning of the 20th century are now extinct. Genetic uniformity leads to an increased vulnerability to insects and disease. Farmers found themselves trapped on a pesticide treadmill. The more they sprayed, the more they had to spray. The increased use of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides increased costs, polluted water, and created health risks. Then in the 1970s, Monsanto introduced Roundup. Because of its ability to kill most weeds, it became one of the most popular herbicides in history. In the mid-1990s, building on technologies that use gene splicing, the Green Revolution turned into the Gene Revolution. Capitalizing on the new technology, Monsanto genetically modified its seeds to be Roundup ready. Normally, Roundup kills anything green, but if the plant is Roundup ready, when it is sprayed, it doesn't die. Now the company that sells you the herbicide also sells you the seed.
A generation ago, farmers would seed a crop and use a herbicide when necessary, but often they wouldn't need to use a herbicide. And today you have a crop that, right when it goes in the ground, is designed to be sprayed.
With Monsanto's Bt corn, the corn itself is registered as an insecticide. This is because every cell has been engineered to manufacture Bt, a natural bacterial toxin. If a corn borer eats any part of the plant, it will die.
And now that we have genetic engineering, we're not just, putting chemicals in this food, we're actually industrializing the food at the genetic cellular level.
One of the most controversial aspects of the gene revolution is the patenting of seeds.
There was a very good reason why for virtually 200 years the Patent Office and Congress did not allow for the patenting of life.
The right to patent is guaranteed by Article 1 in the Constitution. Food crops were deliberately excluded from patenting on moral grounds. Starting in the 1930s, plant breeders were given the right to patent their work. But the patent protection did not extend to the subsequent generations of seeds.
Clearly when you patent a tennis racket, let's say with a new sweet spot, you can describe that very accurately to the Patent Office. But how in the world can you describe a whole plant, much less generations down when that's changed and mutated?
But in 1978, Dr. Ananda Chakrabarty took the first living organism to the Patent Office.
Chakrabarty was an engineer for General Electric, and he created an oil-eating microbe and tried to get it patented. And the U.S. Patent Office said, no way, we do not allow you to patent parts of nature. If you have a tennis racket or a toaster, you can patent that, but you can't patent a part of nature. But General Electric and Chakrabarty were very insistent. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And at one vote majority decision, they said, you can patent this genetically engineered microbe. Interestingly enough, this oil-eating microbe was never used because even though it did eat oil and oil spills, it apparently ate a lot of other things for dessert.
The floodgates were now open for genetic engineering.
During the Reagan administration, they said, let's patent animals. And then human genes and human body parts. I think what the companies would like to say is, we are patenting the gene. And wherever that gene goes, we own anything that we put it in. If it goes into a plant, we own the plant. If it goes into an animal, we own the animal. They might even say around the world, if it goes into a human being, we own that human being. There would be some constitutional problems with that in the United States. But they clearly would want their patent to follow the gene.
The issue of patenting life has never been voted on by the people or the Congress of the United States. The first time many Americans became aware that genetically modified foods were part of their everyday diet was in the year 2001.
Last fall, during lunch with co-workers, Grace Booth enjoyed 3 chicken enchiladas. The food, she recalls, was very good, but then something went very wrong.
And I felt my chest getting tight, and it was hard to breathe.
She didn't know, but she was going into shock.
What are you thinking at this point?
I thought, oh my God, what is happening to me? What is going on? Something is very, very wrong. I felt like I was going to die.
In the emergency room in nearby Oakland, the diagnosis was severe allergic reaction. And from here, Grace Booth's story reached official Washington. At the time, the national corn market was in an uproar. Starling, a gene-modified corn not approved for human food, had been found in taco shells, and recalls were emptying the shelves of corn products. The fear was possible allergic reactions.
If I want a bowl of cornflakes, I want to know that it's safe to eat a bowl of cornflakes.
Do you feel that level of safety right now?
Absolutely not.
It is almost inevitable that there have been thousands of people that have had from a very mild to perhaps serious allergic reaction to Starling,
If it had not been for public interest organizations going in and testing that corn on our own, doing the government's job for it, this scandal would never have come out, and this potential health risk to humans never would have been discovered.
There are 3 government agencies which are responsible for the safety of GMOs. The Department of Agriculture is responsible for assessing the environmental impacts of GMO crops and regulates GMO field testing. But a study of over 8,000 GMO field test applications showed that the USDA did not require a single environmental assessment. The Environmental Protection Agency regulates insecticides. BT, a natural insecticide, is engineered into every cell of genetically engineered BT crops. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for food safety. Any novel substance in food must be tested.
When the biotech companies went to get regulatory approval, they did so on the basis that what they were doing was substantially equivalent, was the term which was being used, substantially equivalent to classical breeding practices, and therefore it should not be regulated in any way. At the same time, however, companies have insisted on patenting their products, and in order to get a patent, it has to be different than anything else. So on the one hand, we're saying it's very different because we don't want to patent it. On the other hand, it's substantially equivalent, so don't bug us with regulation.
Substantial equivalency is obviously nonsense. These, at the cellular level, again, these foods have bacteria, viruses, new genetic constructs that no other foods ever had in history. They're clearly not equivalent.
Since GMOs were considered substantially equivalent to regular food, they fall into the GRAS, or Generally Recognized as Safe category, and the government does not require testing or labeling.
To me, one of the most incomprehensible things about U.S. policy is that we do not even require the labeling of genetically engineered foods.
Many of those GMOs are in the form of corn syrup and soy lecithin. In 2002, a concerned mother in Oregon put a couple $1,000s into an initiative to label GMOs.
How can we trust the same multinational corporations that told us that PCBs, DDT, and dioxin are safe? They don't even want us to know what it is that we're eating. The FDA ignored their own scientists' warnings about the dangers of genetically engineered foods. This is our children's future we're talking about. Let's join 25 other countries that require labeling. It doesn't cost their farmers or consumers anymore. Vote yes on 27. Let's label genetically engineered foods.
The measure was defeated by the $4.6 million industry campaign that features a farmer who resembles the mother.
The last thing we need is more government red tape, more bureaucracy, and higher costs. But that's exactly what Oregon farmers, consumers, and taxpayers would get if Measure 27 passes.
Poll after poll has revealed that 80 to 90% of Americans want GMO food labeled. But the Genetically Engineered Food Right to Know Act that Representative Kucinich, Senator Boxer, and others have introduced every year since 1999 is still waiting to be voted on by Congress.
The public in Europe has reacted with anger and concern at the idea that genetically engineered food products will be on their supermarket shelves. The latest polls showed at least 75% of the European public do not want genetically engineered food.
In response to demand from their citizens, all 15 countries of the European Union adopted rules requiring the labeling of genetically engineered food.
But I think there's a very good reason why the corporations have fought so hard against this labeling. It isn't just about consumer choice. Without labeling, there's no real traceability for the health effects of genetically engineered foods. If you're a mother and you're feeding your baby infant formula, and it's not labeled as genetically engineered with soy, for example, and your child has a toxic or allergic reaction, there's no way you're going to know that that was caused by genetic engineering because it's not on the label. If, however, it is on the label, then you can say, you know what, maybe that contributed to this response in my child. You go to your doctor records it, and there's traceability, and we can begin to get a database on the health effects. And of course, once that database is created, then we have liability to the corporations. So they're opposing labeling, not just because it creates choice and they're afraid that their products will not be bought, but also because labeling is the key way we can trace the health effects of genetically engineered foods and the key way to get the corporations liable for these health effects.
The Japanese people are deeply concerned about the effects of genetically modified food. A trade representative stated, "We will watch the children in the United States for the next 10 years." Organic farming, farmers markets, and community-supported agriculture are only 3 of the many alternatives to the industrialized food model. South Dakota and Nebraska, along with 8 other states, have passed constitutional amendments or state legislation that ban non-family-owned farming.
When the corporation said, Nebraskans don't have the authority to ban we corporate persons from owning farmland, the Nebraska Supreme Court said the Nebraskans can put whatever they want in their constitution. This is their fundamental right. It's the essence of the American democratic system.
The consumer is still king. And the problem is that consumers can't act unless they have adequate information. So one of the things that we can all do is to get as much information as we can, to get that information into the hands of the public, into the hands of consumers, so that consumers can continue to exercise their choice.
Because the food system is fluid, it can change quickly based on the opinions of the public. But if genetically modified food is not labeled, how are consumers able to exercise their rights? The choices we make at the supermarket determine the future of food.
Food is one of the most intimate things we do. And if we don't have any choices about that, I think that's a very troubling scenario.
There are large groups of people in other countries that have never bought into the American model of chemical-intensive large-scale agriculture, and they certainly have not bought into the notion that the efficiencies that one gains by having 2 airline manufacturers in the world, or 4 automakers, or 2 makers of software, they believe that whatever gains you might make in efficiency are lost because you lose diversity. Whether there's going to be any serious change or challenge to the bulk of the way that agricultural land gets managed and farm businesses are organized, I think that's an open question, and frankly, I don't think it will happen unless the American public and farmers themselves sort of stand up and say, wait a minute, we just don't want to go any further down this road. And, you know, we are a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, and hey, we're the people. We don't want to go there.
It's up to you.